Hello there. The global financial system has been dominated by the US dollar for decades. From international trade to reserve holdings, the dollar has been the undisputed king of global finance. But now, a powerful group of nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, known as BRICS, are challenging this status quo. With their combined economic strength, these nations are pushing for a new financial order, one that reduces dependence on the US dollar. But how serious is this challenge? Could the dollar actually lose its dominance? And what does this mean for the global economy? The BRICS nations represent a massive economic force. Together, they account for more than 40% of the world's population and nearly 32% of global GDP when adjusted for purchasing power. Over the years, BRICS has expanded its influence beyond economics, forging stronger political and trade ties. One of their main goals is to reduce reliance on Western financial institutions and the dollar-dominated global economy. But why is this such a priority? The answer lies in how the U.S. has used the dollar as a tool of economic and geopolitical power. Because the dollar is the world's primary reserve currency, the U.S. has the ability to impose economic sanctions, cut off nations from global banking systems, and control major trade transactions. This was evident in 2022 when the U.S. and its allies froze nearly $300 billion of Russia's foreign exchange reserves in response to the Ukraine war. It was a bold demonstration of how the West can weaponize financial systems. This alarmed many countries, especially those in BRICS. They realized that as long as they depend on the dollar, they are vulnerable to similar economic attacks. So they started taking action. One major step has been their push for trade settlements in local currencies. India and Russia, for example, now conduct a significant portion of their trade using the Indian rupee and Russian ruble instead of the dollar. China, the world's second largest economy, has been aggressively promoting the use of its currency, the yuan, in international trade. It has established currency swap agreements with multiple nations and launched the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPS, as an alternative to the US-dominated SWIFT system. As a result, China's trade with countries like Russia, Brazil, and the Middle East is increasingly being settled in yuan. In fact, by mid-2024, nearly 27% of China's total trade was settled in yuan, a significant jump from just 17% in 2022. The BRICS countries are also developing new financial institutions to rival Western dominance. The New Development Bank, NDB, sometimes called the BRICS Bank, was created to provide an alternative to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Unlike the IMF, which often imposes strict conditions on loans, the NDB aims to offer developing nations more financial freedom without the influence of Western powers. This is particularly attractive to countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, many of which have been frustrated by Western financial policies. Another major step BRICS has taken is the discussion of a potential common currency. The idea is to create a new unit of exchange that could replace the dollar in trade among BRICS members. While this is still in its early stages, the fact that it is being considered at all is a sign of how serious these nations are about reducing their dependence on the dollar. But how realistic is the decline of the dollar? Despite the efforts of BRICS, the dollar still has a powerful grip on the global economy. About 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are still held in dollars. Nearly 88% of all international transactions involve the dollar in some way. One key reason for this is trust. The US dollar is seen as a stable and reliable currency, backed by strong institutions and deep financial markets. Countries around the world continue to hold dollars because they see it as a safe asset, especially during times of crisis. Another reason is the sheer size and influence of the US economy. The US remains a dominant player in global trade, finance, and innovation. Many of the world's biggest companies and investment funds operate in dollars, creating a natural demand for the currency. And let's not forget the petrodollar system. Since the 1970s, oil has been priced and traded primarily in dollars. This has created a constant global demand for US currency, as nations need dollars to buy oil and other key commodities. However, even this is now being challenged. China, Russia, and several Middle Eastern nations have been negotiating oil trade agreements that bypass the dollar. For example, China and Saudi Arabia have explored the possibility of pricing some oil contracts in yuan. If more countries follow suit, this could weaken one of the biggest pillars of dollar dominance. But while BRICS is making progress, there are still many challenges. One major issue is the lack of economic unity among BRICS nations. Unlike the European Union, which has a shared economic framework, BRICS consists of countries with vastly different political and economic systems. China is the dominant economy in the group, and many BRICS nations are hesitant to let Beijing take the lead in shaping the bloc's financial future. India, for example, has had tensions with China and is wary of becoming too economically dependent on its neighbor. Another challenge is the lack of a common financial infrastructure. While CHIPS is growing, it is still far behind SWIFT in terms of global adoption. Most banks and institutions still rely on dollar-based systems for security and efficiency. So is the dollar at risk? In the short term, probably not. The dollar's dominance has been built over decades, and it won't disappear overnight. Its stability, trust, and liquidity still make it the preferred global currency. Here is your text, recopied as it is. But in the long run, the trend is clear. BRICS and other emerging economies are laying the foundation for a more multipolar financial system. The dollar may not collapse, but its absolute dominance is being challenged. If BRICS continues to expand, and if more countries join their movement toward de-dollarization, the global financial system could look very different in the next 2 or 3 decades. The implications of this shift are massive. For the U.S., a decline in dollar dominance could mean higher borrowing costs, reduced economic influence, and weaker sanctions power. For BRICS and other emerging economies, it could mean greater financial independence and a more balanced global economy. The world is watching closely. The battle for financial supremacy is not just about money. It's about power, influence, and the future of global trade. Whether the dollar can maintain its throne, or whether BRICS will successfully carve out an alternative path, remains to be seen. What do you think? Is the dollar's dominance coming to an end, or is this just another challenge it will overcome? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.